This video is going to describe why Lights Mirrors Action was written and why it was necessary to give the information in it to caregivers and stroke survivors. Hi there, I'm Dr. Kenneth Monaghan. I'm a university lecturer, I'm a neuroplasticity expert, and I'm the author of Lights Mirrors Action, a guide for transforming the lives of caregivers and stroke survivors. I'm also hugely passionate about developing a caregiver and stroke survivor's home as an ideal place for them to carry out their rehabilitation after a stroke. So after 32 years of working as a physical therapist, where I've worked in numerous neurology centres, I've worked in America, I worked in Florida for 4 years in the early 90s, and I've worked in lots of different parts of Ireland. I know that there are loads, and I've probably seen at least 30 different therapies that are out there that are definitely safe, have evidence behind them that can help stroke survivors to recover physically after they've had a stroke. Now, from talking to caregivers and from talking to stroke survivors and from talking to allied health professionals, I know that when a patient is discharged, when a stroke survivor is discharged home to their own environment, the amount of guidance and the amount of information and very definite programs that are received can be very low. And I suppose from developing a platform on LinkedIn and from discussing with different people around the world over the last year and a half, I know that this goes on in many other countries as well. So from visiting the homes of stroke survivors and caregivers, I know that the guidance and the information that is needed is certainly not out there. So the book was written, and it was written in a special way that it would be easy to understand by non-professional people. So my goal at the start was that, it would not, you wouldn't have to be an allied health professional or a medically qualified person to be able to understand the information in it. When you're a caregiver at home and you're trying to understand um, what how to help your stroke survivor, then it's very important that the information that's relayed to you is easy for you to understand so that you can pass on that information and educate your stroke survivor, which is a huge part of the very first phase of recovery, is to educate your stroke survivor about the different principles and concepts. And a very good example is the idea of neuroplasticity. So unless we understand that neuroplasticity exists and unless that it can be explained in a very easy to understand way to your stroke survivor, then it's very difficult to motivate people to continue doing the amount of repetitions that's needed to get that best physical recovery. I also knew that, with so many therapies available, and we mentioned, and if you'd like a resource that shows you and discusses many of the different therapies, then Tom Balchin's series of stroke books are definitely very worth buying. For me, I decided that, from the point of view of, not overburdening your stroke survivor, I would limit the therapies that were chosen in this particular book to just 6. And the 6 therapies that are used, 3 of them would be very common. So walking, stretching, everybody would know about. But 3 of the therapies are therapies that we research on a regular basis in our Neuroplasticity Research Group in Atlantic Technological University, where I work. But what we wanted and what I wanted to achieve was that we would be able to run those therapies. So we're talking about mirror therapy, cross-education effect, and sensory substitution effect, and to be able to run those in a very cost-effective way in somebody's own home. So caregivers, you need to read this book because you're going to feel very overwhelmed when your stroke survivor arrives home. You won't have the guidance necessary to show you what programs to run. Yet you are hugely important because you're needed there in the home as a safety net for your stroke survivor. You're needed when your stroke survivor does therapies to be able to supervise them and to make sure that they don't fall or that they don't injure themselves. You're essentially a project manager for your stroke survivor. So The therapies that are going to be discussed will be the walking, the stretching, the mirror therapy, the cross education, and sensory substitution effect. And I felt that the majority of the information that would come in this particular book would be very much psychology based. It would be very much education of the stroke survivor, educating about some of the principles like neuroplasticity, some of the principles about self-belief effects, why if you expect positive outcomes that you enhance the ability of your body to produce an environment that allows that to happen. So I felt that as a caregiver, if it was explained in very easy to understand terms, these principles, then you could go and discuss them with your stroke survivor as well, and do this before the therapy at home actually starts. Because a big part of um, medical treatments working, and the information that I'm going to mention here is definitely backed up by David Robson's excellent book, The Expectation Effect, says that when it's explained, when treatments are explained to you, explained why you should be getting them and explained why they should work, then our outcomes are far, far superior than if it's not explained. So as a caregiver, this is your job. You can manage to do this. You don't need a background in stroke, and you don't need to have medical training to be able to explain to your stroke survivor information like this. So the main message coming from this starting off is that Lights Mirrors Action was written because over 32 years I know that caregivers are struggling, being overwhelmed when a stroke survivor is returned home, discharged home, because there's a lack of guidance, there's a lack of exact information on how to run a program in your own home. And the program is not necessarily just the provision of exercises and different therapies, it's also educating your stroke survivor about certain concepts and principles. Now, if you want a little bit more information about all of these things, then go to my website, www.lightsmirrorsaction.com, and there you'll find extra resources, extra worksheets, extra information, extra YouTube videos that will enhance all of the information that's in Lights Mirrors Action. Thank you very, very much for listening, and thank you for purchasing the book.